Right. Hello. Welcome to Code Nation Fellowship's lesson 2.1 on the rock, paper, scissors project. My name is Jessica, and I will be taking you through these slides. So first and foremost, please make sure that you turn in the do now to your program. And we'll just go ahead and get started with the lesson. So again, this is the beginning of Unit 2 on the rock, paper, scissors project. Before we get into the actual project, we will be discussing how to use event handlers in JavaScript. The vocabulary is event handler, selector, input, and .val. We will also use professional software development practices and plan a project and create milestones to complete that project throughout this unit. So, JavaScript. I'm sure you're familiar with JavaScript at this point. JavaScript is what makes our websites interactive. So you can see in these two examples of YouTube and Popcode, when the user clicks on things, other things pop up. When the user puts their mouse over something, sometimes that will trigger a list or some text or some changing of colors on the page. All of that are examples of interactivity that JavaScript brings to the page. So one way we can add interactivity using JavaScript is by using something called event handlers. You may have referred to this as a click handler. That's also correct, but a click handler is a specific event handler involving clicks, right? So they're all event handlers. In this example, when the user clicks a button, or rather when the user clicks any button on the page with the tag button, the image or the image tags on the page will hide. So an event is something that triggers an action. It can be something the user does, like clicking. That's an event handler we use a lot in our classes. Typing or moving the mouse over something. Or it can be something that happens in the browser, such as when the page finishes loading or the user scrolls down the page. So let's take a moment to think about this one. Pause the video and think, what is the event in the code below? And in this code, the event is the click, right? So in this scenario, the user is clicking a button or any of the button tags on the page, and the images on the page will hide once that happens. So the event handler refers to what the computer will do when an event is triggered. Think of it as a to-do list that starts specifically when that event occurs. Let's take a moment to think about this one. So go ahead and pause and think, what is included in the event handler in the code below? So in this event handler, when the user clicks a button, or rather any of the button tags on the page. So since there's no class here, no ID, this will affect any button on the page. So when the user clicks that, any of the images on the page will hide. So here the event would be the click. All right, here's a lightning question. So what will happen when the code to the right is executed? So go ahead and pause the video and take a moment to think about that. Okay, so here's kind of like in plain English what is going on with this code. So When the user clicks a button, and based on what the button is called here, this class is submit button, I'm going to assume that the user is clicking a button that says submit on it. That's what makes the most sense. So when the user clicks the submit button, the computer is going to store the value of the input of whatever the user wrote into a variable called user comments. And the computer is also going to display in the comment section whatever the user put in the input. So think about like an Instagram comments page. So think about like when the user is typing their comment, then they click submit. This is the code, or roughly this is the type of code that you would need in order to display the user's comment underneath in the comment section. So there is another way to write event handlers that we have not yet learned, and that is called vanilla JavaScript. So vanilla JavaScript is writing JavaScript without the help of a library like jQuery. You can think of vanilla JavaScript as just plain JavaScript. So we're used to writing jQuery in our class. You can think of jQuery as kind of like a shorthand. To me, at least, it's just like a shorter way of using JavaScript. So vanilla JavaScript would be like just using, like just writing JavaScript without the help of jQuery. So take a moment to pause the video and think about this. What are some similarities and differences between jQuery and vanilla JavaScript on this slide that you see? Right, so hopefully you did that. I'm going to go ahead and talk through some of these. So you'll notice that jQuery, which we're familiar with, we use the $sign to pretty much start any line and to select something. In vanilla JavaScript, instead of that $sign, we're going to actually write some text. This is one example of what we can use to select. So it's document.querySelector. You'll notice that it's obviously longer, right, than jQuery, which is why I brought up jQuery being kind of like a shorthand. You'll also see here the click in jQuery versus in vanilla JavaScript, it's on click and then equals. So again, slightly longer. And then in jQuery, we, instead of like this .hide scenario, we would actually do this. So again, a little bit longer, .style, .display, kind of like triggering the CSS, and then equals none, which would do the hiding. So again, it's a little longer, no $sign usage, definitely more text involved. But that's an example of vanilla JavaScript. And JavaScript uses the document object model, or the DOM, or the DOM, which is what I'm going to call it. So the DOM allows programs and scripts like JavaScript to access and update the content, structure, and style of a web document. So in this example here, in document.querySelector, the document part is referring to the whole page. So so the whole page is called a document. And then in this part where you see like the query selector and the dot button, here in vanilla JavaScript, this is where the coder is accessing the DOM to choose the selector dot button. So again, a little different from jQuery and how you would select that there. So JavaScript methods allow coders to access specific elements from HTML. These are followed by the selector you are choosing from HTML. Note that what is written in the parentheses changes based on the method you choose. So this top one right here, the document.querySelector, that's the one that I've been emphasizing because that's mainly what we're going to be using, at least for the purpose of this course, when we're writing vanilla JavaScript. There are other examples here that do different things, but don't worry so much about those for right now. So just like in jQuery, changing HTML with vanilla JS will look somewhat different than changing CSS. In both cases, you need to use different JavaScript properties. So these are two examples of JavaScript properties. So inner HTML is the property which changes the HTML, or one of the properties at least, and style is a property which changes the CSS. So with that in mind, pause the video once I ask you this question and take a moment to think about it. Take a look at this vanilla JavaScript code. What do you think are the jQuery equivalents for .inner HTML and .style? I'm going to go ahead and reveal the answer. Hopefully you've thought about it. So the .inner HTML in jQuery, we would use .html. So that's probably what you're more familiar with. And then this .style part that we're seeing in the vanilla JavaScript, in jQuery, that is the .css that we use to change, for example, the color, or it could also be background color, anything like that that we use in jQuery. In vanilla JavaScript, it is .style. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the guided practice and use vanilla JavaScript to create a very simple translation web page. So I'm going to read you the instructions here and kind of like familiarize you with what's going on before I walk you through it. So it's time to try using vanilla JavaScript to create a web page that will greet its user in the language of their choice. Number one, describe which of the 4 languages you want to create a click handler for. Number two, write the JS that would provide a greeting in that language when the user clicks the appropriate button. Don't forget to save the user's input, their name, so the greeting can be especially for them. Okay, so you'll see that the HTML is done already. We have everything we need, especially right here, I would say. With the input section, that's like where the user's gonna write their name. Then we have the code for all these buttons, the different greetings. And then we have a section here where the name and the greeting will appear at the bottom of the page within this div. And then in the JavaScript, we have like this lovely setup here for our vanilla JavaScript to get us started. So go ahead and instead of like just listening to me right away, I encourage you to like try this. Go back to the slides and think about what would go in these blanks here. So hopefully you'll pause here and do that. And I'm gonna go ahead and walk us through it. So I'm gonna start copying the format up here. So this is how we're gonna select in vanilla JavaScript. So document, and then in this blank here is going to be query selector. That's what we're using to select. Then I'm gonna go ahead and select .Spanish. The class was Spanish. So let me pause right there and let's talk about like why I'm doing that. So I speak Spanish. So I'm choosing the Spanish greeting, but obviously you could have chosen whatever you wanted. And with the Spanish greeting, when I look at the HTML in line 12, Spanish is the class that was given to the Spanish greeting button. So that is what the user is going to be clicking for their Spanish greeting. So that's what needs to be in here. That's what's going to be clicked. So I'm going to go ahead and continue writing in the vanilla JS format. So .onClick equals function, parentheses, curly brackets, And then as soon as I open that, because I definitely forgot this last time when I was working on my own, I'm gonna close it at the end, just so like everything's set with that while I continue. Okay, so that's all good. Now, the next part is this reminder here. Don't forget to save the user's input. We definitely need to save whatever the user puts in here so that we're able to display that in the message at the bottom of the page. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to declare a variable. So let user input. I'm calling the variable user input because that's what makes the most sense to call it. So user input. I'm setting it equal to, so this is where we're retrieving the value of what the user puts in the input. So I'm going to use jQuery for this part, jQuery selector. That is not vanilla JavaScript. But for the purpose of like this class and certainly for this project, we're gonna keep using jQuery to retrieve the values of inputs. It's just what makes the most sense for this project. But if you're interested in doing it the vanilla JavaScript way, you can certainly research that and talk to your volunteers about it. So here we go, jQuery selector, and I'm gonna select dot name and then dot val to retrieve the value and a semicolon at the end. So where did I get the dot name from? If you look at line 10 of the HTML, the input was given the class of name, and the input is what goes in here, right, in this your name section. So that's that is the input that I want to retrieve the value from. That's where I'm getting that's where I'm storing whatever the user puts in there. So dot name is what goes in that selector. All right. And so the next part, again, I'm just gonna start with our vanilla JavaScript method here of selecting. So it's gonna be dot document, excuse me. And I know how to spell. Let's see, document dot query selector again. And then parentheses and quotations again. And now this time what's going in that parentheses is going to be dot message. Why is it going to be dot message? You probably figured this out by now, but again, where the user is, or where the computer is going to display what the user has written along with their greeting, that's going to be at the bottom of the page here, and we've already given that a class of message. So that is where I want the greeting, the message to pop up. So that's going to be dot message. Then I'm going to keep going with what was provided here in vanilla JavaScript. So it's going to be dot inner HTML equals, and now what's going to go in here is this is like what exactly we want to see in this this message area. So what is it that we want to see? We want to see the Spanish greeting, and we also want to see whatever the user put as their name, right? So in this case, I'm going to write hola as the string. Then I'm going to close that string and put a plus because I want that. And I also want whatever this value was. And we already gave that, we put that in the variable user input. So I'm going to actually just put user input here, no like quotations or anything like that because it's a variable, and then semicolon. And that should work. So let's try it with my name, Spanish greeting. Perfect. Except one little thing. It came out as one word, and that's not fun, right? That's not right. So think about how you would fix that. And I'll go ahead and show you. So there's two ways you can do this. So where I put the OLA string, I can actually just add a space after the OLA and before the quotation. And then you'll see there's a space like that. Or you can do like plus and then add a string with a space in it, then another plus. That's a bit longer, but that should also work. Yep. So either way is fine. And that's it. That's vanilla JavaScript. So for the independent practice, go ahead and choose one of these different greetings here, and try writing the event handler yourself with vanilla JavaScript. Certainly use this guided practice to guide you through that. That's it for that. All right. So next is project time. I'm going to introduce you to the project for this unit. So you are going to build a rock, paper, scissors game. I'm sure you're familiar with that game. Let's look at the sample website. So pretty clean and easy to understand. So submit your choice below of rock, paper, or scissors. I'm going to put rock. And I'm going to click shoot. I chose rock. The computer chose rock and nobody won. Let me try again. I'm going to put paper. User put paper. The computer put paper. No one wins again. Okay, let's try one more time. Scissors. All right, this time I chose scissors. The computer chose rock and the computer won. So you got the gist of it, right? It's rock, paper, scissors online. You're gonna make that. So what do you notice about this project? What do you think it will take to build this? What do you know how to do already? And what do you need to learn? Take 2 minutes to pause this video and think about that on your own, and then we'll talk about it. So in order to make this project, you probably thought about how you're going to need HTML, specifically H1 tags or H2, H3, etc., P tags to write, you know, this text or some of this text at least. An image tag if you want to have an image like this on your page or images. In terms of CSS, you'll definitely want CSS to make your page look nicer. But specifically think about Flexbox and how you might use that here to kind of like organize the layout of your page. And then with the JavaScript, specifically like this bottom part of the sample website, you're going to want to use JavaScript for this input, right? Because we need to store whatever the user writes in here. When they click the button, we need to store that so that we can display it, right? So that's one thing. Also for the computer is generating a random choice. It's just like choosing randomly. So we're definitely going to need JavaScript to set that up so that random choices are made there. And then finally, think about how the website is able to determine who wins every time I do this. You're definitely going to need JavaScript to have the computer determine who the winner is. So you may want to think about conditional statements in particular and how you could use that to make that work. So those are the central components of this project. There's a project planning document. I'm going to walk you through it briefly. Your program manager should have made this available to you. Speak to them if they haven't. But this is what it looks like. So this is kind of like a checklist on this page to make sure that you got all these done. Any extra goals just to make your website even better, and of course the code cleanliness. So make sure you familiarize yourself with that. And then this next part is your project plan. So this is a space for you to brainstorm, figure out, how you're going to go about this. There's a wireframe section, which I highly recommend to kind of like draw it out, sketch it out before you actually start writing the code. And then finally, there's a pseudocode section. I recommend that you just like write out your ideas before you write the actual code. It's really helpful. Just because like when you're making a website with so many different parts, it'll help you kind of organize your thoughts and be more prepared when you're going to start the actual coding. So make sure you do that. So that's the project planning document. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the GitHub starter page, or like the GitHub project setup, so that you could get started on your page. So if you go to the starter code on GitHub here, it'll take you to the GitHub page for this project. You're going to click the fork button on the top right of the page. You should have done this before by now. But yeah, you should see that. And then you'll know that it's forked because the page will load again, and then you'll see that the name at the top of the page, the GitHub username, should be your username. It should be your username that pops up here once you've forked. So that's how you'll know that it was done successfully. And then once you've done that, you're going to copy the link at the top of your browser right there. Once you've copied that link, you're going to go ahead and open Glitch in a different tab and log into your account. Once you've logged into your account, you'll click New Project. When you click New Project, you'll click Import from GitHub. And when you click Import from GitHub, you're gonna paste the link that you copied from GitHub in the prompt, and then click OK. And then it's gonna take like a few seconds to load, and then bam, everything should be there. You'll see the README page for the project. Look through that and familiarize yourself with like all the tasks and the different parts. And that's pretty much it. Don't forget to submit once you've forked and set everything up. Submit the link to your Glitch project to your program manager. They should have a place for you to submit that. But I think that's it. So yeah, thank you for being with me. I hope this was helpful for learning some vanilla JavaScript and also getting you started with some ideas on your project. So now that you've kind of gone through this video, take the time to work on your project and complete the day one tasks. Definitely speak to your program manager and volunteers if you need extra support. And that's it. Thank you. Bye.